The neurologist said it plainly, without apology, as though he were reading a weather report. Mrs. Harlow, there is no surgical option remaining. The nerve damage is consistent with what we've documented for the past 11 years. I would encourage you to focus on management rather than recovery. Lenora Harlow thanked him, which was a thing she had learned to do without meaning it, and then she was wheeled back through the corridor of the Calgary Medical Center by her assistant, past the watercolor prints of the Rockies that nobody ever actually looked at, and out into the gray February air where her car was already waiting. She did not cry. She hadn't cried in a long time. What she did instead was go back to work. The Harlow Group occupied 3 floors of a glass tower on 8th Avenue Southwest, the kind of building that reflected the sky so perfectly you could look directly at it and see nothing of what was happening inside, which was, most people agreed, entirely appropriate. Lenora had built the firm into one of Western Canada's most respected private equity houses over the course of 15 years, and she had done it the way she did everything. By seeing what other people missed and acting before they had finished thinking. The wheelchair was 11 years old now. The staff had long since stopped offering to help her navigate the building. She preferred it that way. Her chief of staff, a sharp-jawed woman named Petra Walsh, met her in the elevator bay with a tablet and a coffee. Meridian Capital called again, Petra said, and the board wants to schedule the quarterly review 2 weeks early. Tell Meridian I'll call Thursday. Schedule the board for the 14th. Dr. Fenwick's office also confirmed your Thursday appointment. Lenora looked at her. Cancel it. Petra didn't argue. She had learned, over 4 years, which battles were worth having. Dr. Samuel Fenwick had been Lenora's specialist since the beginning. He had been, in the early years, a kind of anchor, the one physician who seemed to take seriously the possibility of meaningful recovery. He had designed her treatment protocol himself, adjusting it every 6 months as new research emerged. He had, on more than one occasion, told her he believed she would walk again. Lenora had stopped believing him around year 7. Now, at year 11, she found herself wondering what exactly he had been doing with all those Thursday afternoons. The firm had a contract with a courier service called Ridgeline Delivery. Nothing glamorous. Mostly internal document transfers and small parcels between the downtown office and their processing center in Ramsey. The arrangement had been in place for 3 years, and Lenora had never thought about it, which was the highest compliment she could give any administrative function. The driver changed sometime in November. She didn't notice at first. She noticed the delivery times improved. Parcels that used to arrive by 4 were suddenly appearing before noon. She noticed because Petra mentioned it, not because she was paying attention. The first time she actually saw him was in the lobby on a Thursday morning when he was signing out at the security desk and she was coming in from a board call that had run long. He was maybe 35, wearing a Ridgeline jacket that had seen better days, with the particular look of a man who was tired in a way that had become structural, not from one bad night, but from years of not quite enough of anything. He was also, she noticed, holding a child's drawing that had been folded into a paper airplane and clearly launched from somewhere it shouldn't have been. He was unfolding it very carefully, smoothing the creases, putting it in the front pocket of his jacket like it was a document worth keeping. He looked up and saw her watching. Sorry, he said, though he had done nothing to apologize for. Remy hid it in the package, my daughter. She does that. How old? 6. She thinks if she sends enough drawings, the people in the buildings will put them on their walls. Lenora thought about the watercolor prints in the hospital corridor. She's not wrong, she said, and went to the elevator. His name was Joel Adair. She found this out from Petra, who found it out because Lenora asked her to, which was unusual enough that Petra did not comment on it. 34 years old. Divorced, though the word barely applied. His ex-wife had left when Remy was 8 months old, and the departure had been complete enough that there was no custody arrangement, no ongoing dispute, just absence. He had been driving for Ridgeline for 2 years. Before that, a physiotherapy assistant at a clinic in Forest Lawn, a job he'd left when the clinic closed. Lenora read the file and then set it aside and did not look at it again. The next Thursday, when he came to the 20th floor for a signature on a bonded transfer, she was in the glass-walled boardroom with a view of the Bow River, and she watched him through the wall as Petra handled the paperwork. He did not look around the office the way most people did, the way they cataloged the furniture and the art and the view, and then reassembled their ideas about who she was. He looked at the documents, signed what Petra needed him to sign, and left. She found herself curious in a way she hadn't been curious about a person in a long time. It started because she was rude to him. This was not unusual. Lenora had been described over the course of her career as exacting, demanding, and occasionally withering. She did not consider these criticisms. What she lacked in patience, she made up for in precision, and most people who worked with her for more than a year came to understand the difference. Joel Adair did not work for her. He worked for Ridgeline, which meant he was technically insulated from her professional authority and practically insulated from nothing, because she was Lenora Harlow, and this was her building. She was having a bad Thursday in March, the kind of day where the pain in her lower back had climbed to a register that made thinking difficult, where the physiotherapy brace she wore under her clothes felt like it was tightening of its own volition. And when he arrived at noon with a package that had been mislabeled, she told him, in front of 3 junior analysts, that this was the second labeling error in a month, and if Ridgeline couldn't manage basic administrative accuracy, the firm would find a service that could. He looked at her for a moment. "The label came from your processing center," he said. "I can pull the scan timestamp if it would help." He was not defensive. He was not apologetic. He simply told her where the mistake had come from in the same tone she imagined he used to tell Remy that the sky was blue. She dismissed him. He left. 2 hours later, Petra put a printed scan log on her desk, timestamped and annotated, showing clearly that the label error had originated at the Ramsey Center. "He dropped it at security," Petra said. "Didn't ask us to call him, just left it." Lenora looked at the log for a long moment. The next Thursday, she told him the package had been sorted out. "I know," he said. "I hope it helped." She wanted to ask why he'd bothered. She didn't. By April, she had started taking her afternoon calls near the lobby level on Thursdays, which she told herself was a scheduling coincidence and which was not. They had, by this point, developed something that could not quite be called a friendship, and was more than a professional acquaintance. He answered her questions directly. She had learned, over 30 years, that this was rarer than it should have been. Most people answered the question they thought she was asking, or the question they wanted her to be asking, or some performance of an answer that had more to do with their own position than with truth. Joel answered the question. She asked him once about the physiotherapy work, whether he missed it. He thought about it before he answered. "I miss the problem-solving part," he said. "Every patient is a different puzzle. The same diagnosis doesn't look the same on 2 people. Why did you leave?" "Clinic closed." He paused. "I could have found another position. But Remy was 2, and the hours were brutal, and driving let me pick her up from school." He said this without performance, without the self-sacrificing inflection people usually used when they described giving something up for a child. It was just the calculation he had made, and he stood by it. Lenora thought about the kinds of calculations she had made in her life and what she stood by. She wore the brace every day. This was not publicly known. What was publicly known? 11 years ago, Lenora Harlow had been in a car accident on the Deerfoot that had resulted in spinal trauma and partial paralysis. She had undergone surgery. She had not fully recovered. She used a wheelchair. What was not publicly known? In the first 3 years under Dr. Fenwick's care, she had experienced significant improvement. Movement returning to her lower limbs, sensation, even some weight-bearing capacity in controlled settings. The brace had been part of the treatment protocol, a sophisticated spinal orthosis that Fenwick had designed in consultation with a biomedical engineer at the University of Calgary. And then somewhere around year 4, the progress had stalled. And then, somewhere around year 6, she had quietly gotten worse. Fenwick had explanations. The nervous system was not linear. Plateau periods were expected. New research suggested the earlier improvement had been at the upper edge of statistical probability. She should not be discouraged. They would adjust the protocol. He adjusted the protocol twice a year, every year, and she adjusted her expectations downward to match. By year 11, she was, on her worst days, in more pain than she had been in year 2. She had told this to 3 different physicians. They had reviewed Fenwick's notes and told her the treatment approach was sound. She had stopped telling people. It was a Wednesday in May, which was not a Thursday, and Joel was there because Ridgeline had rerouted his schedule to cover a colleague's absence. He arrived at the 20th floor at 3:15, and Lenora was not in a lobby or a boardroom. She was in the open office area adjacent to the reception desk, having come out of a meeting that had gone sideways, and she was adjusting the brace through her jacket in a way she had not meant to do in front of anyone. The 2 junior analysts at the nearby desks looked away immediately, the way people looked away from things that made them uncomfortable. Joel did not look away. He also did not stare. He was looking at the way she was adjusting it, at the positioning of her hands, at the angle of her spine, the way someone looks when they are actually seeing something rather than deciding how to react to it. "Where's the pressure point?" he said. She looked up. "You're compensating to the left," he said, "which means it's hitting wrong on the right side, probably below L3. She said nothing. "Sorry." He set the parcel down. "I did spinal orthotics for 2 years at the Forest Lawn Clinic. I'm not trying to. I'll just finish the paperwork." "Below L4, actually," she said. He nodded. He didn't say anything else. Petra appeared with the signature sheet, and he completed the handoff, and he left, and Lenora sat in her office for the rest of the afternoon thinking about the way he had looked at the brace. Not at her, at the brace. The following Thursday, she asked him if he could look at it. She had made the decision somewhere between Tuesday night and Wednesday morning, which was not enough time for her to overthink it, which was probably why she was able to ask. They used a meeting room on the 19th floor. Petra stood in the corridor. Joel examined the brace, not her, the brace, with the focused attention of someone who has learned to find the truth in objects rather than in what people say about them. He was quiet for a long time. "How long have you had this one?" he said. 4 years. And Fenwick fitted this himself?" "Yes." He turned it over in his hands. He looked at the strut alignment, the tension calibration on the side panels, the contact points at the lumbar and sacral regions. He was not performing expertise. He was thinking. "The left strut tension is set about 40% higher than the right," he said finally. "It's been adjusted for my posture compensation." "Your posture compensation is because the left strut is set too high," he said. "If you're compensating to the left, you don't tighten the left side. That makes the compensation worse, not better." She looked at him. "I'm not a physician," he said. "I want to be clear about that. But I fitted maybe 200 of these, and I've never seen this calibration pattern on a patient who was improving." He paused. "I've seen it on patients who weren't supposed to improve." The room was quiet for a moment. "What do you mean by that?" she said. "I mean, this calibration is actively limiting your range of motion," he said. "It's not neutral. It's not a plateau. It's pushing against recovery." He put the brace down on the table between them. "I could be wrong," he said, "but I don't think I am." She did not cancel the following Thursday's appointment with Fenwick. She walked into it, wheeled into it, with a list of questions she had written herself without Petra's help at 2 in the morning. She asked about the left strut calibration. Fenwick explained it was compensatory. She asked him to show her the original fitting notes from 4 years ago. He said they were in her file. She asked him to pull the file and show her. He said he would have the records department send them to her office. She asked why he couldn't pull them now. There was a pause in the conversation that lasted perhaps 3 seconds, which in a medical office is not very long at all, but which Lenora had spent 11 years learning to read. "Of course," he said, and left the room to retrieve them. In the 2 minutes he was gone, she took photographs of the brace fittings chart on the wall, the calibration log on the desk, and the treatment summary pinned above his workstation. She had not planned to do this. Her hands did it while her mind was still deciding. The records department sent the original fitting notes 3 days later after 2 follow-up calls from Petra. She sent them to an independent biomedical engineer at the University of Alberta, a woman named Dr. Anura Singh, who had no connection to Fenwick or to the Calgary Medical Center, along with the photographs from the office and the calibration notes Joel had walked her through. Dr. Singh called her on a Tuesday morning. "I want to be careful about how I say this," Dr. Singh said, "because I want to be accurate rather than inflammatory. But the calibration adjustments on this orthosis over the past 7 years are not consistent with therapeutic intent. They are consistent with a pattern I would describe as progressive suppression of recovery adjacent function." Lenora was quiet. "That means whoever was adjusting this brace," Dr. Singh said, "was making it harder for you to get better, systematically." Oversaid. "Could it be error?" Lenora said. "One adjustment, possibly. 2, unlikely. 7 years of biannual adjustments all trending in the same direction?" She paused. "No, this is not error." What Lenora did next was not impulsive. She was not an impulsive person. She had built a private equity firm in one of the most competitive markets in the country by being the person who saw clearly and moved precisely, and that was what she did now. She retained a lawyer, not the firm's lawyer, a personal one, on a Wednesday. She filed a complaint with the Alberta College of Physicians and Surgeons on Thursday. She requested, through her lawyer, the preservation of all records related to her case at the Calgary Medical Center and at Fenwick's private practice. She also, through separate counsel, commissioned a review of Fenwick's financial records, which became relevant when it emerged, 3 weeks later, that Fenwick held a minority stake in Meridian Capital. Meridian Capital, which had been calling her office for 4 months about a proposed merger that would have substantially diluted her controlling interest in the Harlow Group. A merger that could not proceed if she remained at the helm. A merger that became significantly more viable if her capacity to lead was called into question. She sat with this information for exactly 1 evening. She allowed herself, in private, the particular grief of discovering that the person you had trusted with your body for 11 years had been renting that trust to someone else. She did not perform this grief. She did not share it. She felt it, and then she filed it in the part of herself where she kept things that had made her harder and more certain, and she went back to work. The formal hearing before the ACPS was 6 weeks later. Fenwick had, by this point, retained his own counsel and issued a statement characterizing the complaint as a misunderstanding stemming from a non-specialist misinterpretation of complex orthotics calibration. The statement did not name Joel. It didn't need to. The implication was clear. Lenora brought Dr. Singh, whose credentials in biomedical engineering were, as it happened, more extensive than Fenwick's own credentials in orthotic therapy. She brought the calibration logs, the original fitting notes, and a 6-page analysis that Dr. Singh had written specifically for a non-specialist audience, because Lenora had asked her to, because she wanted the panel to understand every word. She also brought Joel, who had not been asked, who had in fact said clearly that he didn't want to be central to whatever happened next. She had told him he didn't have to say anything he wasn't certain of. "I'm certain," he said. "That's not the problem." He testified for 40 minutes. He explained, in the same direct way he explained everything, what he had observed in the brace calibration, what it indicated based on his 2 years of clinical experience with spinal orthotics patients, and what the likely functional impact would have been over a 7-year period of progressive adjustment. He was not a physician. He said so twice. He was a man who had fitted 200 braces and knew what recovery looked like and knew what suppression looked like and had learned, a long time ago, that the difference between the two was not mysterious. It was in the numbers, in the angles, in the things that were right there to be seen if you were willing to look. The panel asked him how he had come to examine Miss Harlow's brace. "She asked me," he said. They asked why she had asked him. "I think," he said, "because I was the only one who looked at it instead of at her." Fenwick's license was suspended pending a full investigation. The Meridian merger proposal was withdrawn. 2 members of the Harlow Group's board, who who had been quietly engaged in preliminary discussions with Meridian on terms that had not been disclosed to Lenora, resigned before those discussions could be formally reviewed. Lenora said nothing about either of them publicly. Her lawyer was thorough. Dr. Singh referred her to a specialist at the University of Alberta, a woman who had no prior knowledge of her case, no prior assumptions, and no financial relationships with anyone in the story. The new brace was fitted in July. It was calibrated based on her actual musculature, her actual nerve function, her actual recovery trajectory. The first time she stood at the window of her office on her own, looking down at 8th Avenue and the river beyond it, she did not make it more than 30 seconds before her legs reminded her. They were 11 years out of practice. She stood for 30 seconds. She sat back down. She counted it. It was a Thursday in August, which meant Joel was in the building. She had never changed the contract with Ridgeline. She had thought about it in the weeks when everything was still uncertain, and she wasn't sure what she owed him or how to categorize what had happened between them. She had decided, eventually, that she didn't need to categorize it. She had needed someone to look at the problem instead of at her, and he had looked, and that was sufficient. He came to the 20th floor at 11:15 with 2 parcels and a signature request. There was a drawing in the delivery envelope, tucked into the corner, a house with a very large sun and what might have been a dog or possibly a cloud shaped like a dog. "Remy," he said by way of explanation. "She's consistent," Lenora said. "She is." He signed the sheet Petra handed him. He didn't ask how she was. He had learned, sometime in the spring, that she didn't like being asked how she was in the way people meant it, which was usually, "Are you still broken, and in what direction?" "I stood at the window yesterday," she said. He looked at her. 30 seconds, she said. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, 30 seconds is how it starts. He picked up the empty return envelope, tucked the drawing in his jacket pocket, the careful way he always did it, and went to the elevator. She watched him go, and then she turned back to the window, where the August light was coming in hard off the river. And for the first time in a very long time, she thought about what the view might look like from standing height.